my night was turned to day. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul.
Amen. That's wonderful singing. Yeah, as I started going through this, there was too much for one Wednesday, not enough for two, so I favored on the too much for one. So I told Reagan, let's just do one song. Got a lot to do. But we're going to cover 600 years tonight, so buckle up. But before we do, let me just give you a couple of things that are going on this week, okay? Things you need to know about this week and next. One, Operation Christmas shoe boxes, okay? Those are due Sunday. So if you've not done it, if you hadn't picked up a box, there's still some left, and then we run out up there. We got some back here. If you want to do one, two, however many boxes you want to do, they ask for a $10 donation for each box for all the handling that goes with it. But they're due Sunday. So when we'll put them in the library when you bring them, and then we're going to put them up front and pray over them Sunday. David. You can do it online. Mm-hmm. You can just put a $10 bill in the box, or you can put a check in there if you'd like. Doing it online is pretty easy. Yeah, you can just do it inside the box, because Tammy is going to go through every box, and she'll gather the money and go out to eat. No, I'm just kidding. She'll gather the money. She'll gather the money and make sure that it gets to where it needs to go. So yeah, you can just put the $10 in the box. All right, fantastic. Something else. Next Wednesday we have a treat, and I'm going to announce it. You saw that there's a poster on the door, if you noticed. And Sunday there'll be a short little video about it. We have a man from the Baptist Foundation who's going to come and spend an hour with us talking about wills and trusts and estate planning, and including the Lord in your estate planning and all those kinds of things. We've had a couple of incidents over the last year that really brought this to the surface, that we need to think of these things. Not one of us is guaranteed tomorrow. And if I were to be hitting on the way home and die and go to heaven, I'd be fine. But Suzanne would be in a bad situation if I didn't leave things in order for her. So, yes, sir.
I just need a list of my beds.
You just what? Oh. So, anyway, Mitch especially needs this course. So that is next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And invite people. This is a subject that people might be interested in. And if they're going, well, I never go, I'll feel bad if I just show up for that. Get over that. Just if we fill this room up, that's awesome. Okay. So that is next Wednesday. Let's see. Anything else that needs to go before? Okay. We have the food drive. So anyway, now let's get to the business at hand. 600 years. We can do it. Starting now. Last week in our series on walking through the story of redemption, we arrived at a very dark time in Israel's history. During the middle of the 6th century BC, there was no longer a kingdom of Israel. Bottom line, there was no kingdom of Israel. Just a relatively few very poor Jews lived in the land that had been promised to Abraham and Isaac. The once glorious city of Jerusalem, with the beautiful temple that Solomon had built, was just laying in ruins. It'd been burned to the ground. The remaining descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob lived in exile in Babylon. And it was like curtains. It was like that was it. We have some more. Oh, that was last one. Is that the right one? Does it say the 12? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh, you got the ones that said the 5th. Okay. Anyway, so So everything was in ruins, and it looked like Israel was over. It looked like Abrahamic covenant. God just said, "Oh, never mind." Davidic covenant, nah. It just looked bad. And God had warned the people of Judah that this was going to happen. During the time of Kings Hezekiah and Manasseh, God had warned them through the prophets Micah and Isaiah that it was coming. During the good days of King Josiah, God continued to warn his people through the prophets Zephaniah and Habakkuk. But it was through the prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel that God gave the most detailed accounts of what was going to happen. But it was also through Jeremiah, though, that God also gave that ray of hope. Though he clearly prophesied that they would be exiled into Babylon, he also told them, he specifically told them, that God would bring back the nation of Judah in 70 years. That's found in Jeremiah 25. So there was it was a time period. In fact, Jeremiah said, thrive in Babylon. Don't try to get away. Just thrive. Build your house, build your family. Just thrive, because in 70 years, God's going to bring you back. So this evening, I want us to pick up the story in the Babylonian captivity. So at the time when Nebuchadnezzar arrested Jehoiakim, king of Judah, he also took into custody others. And amongst those were four young men who impressed the chief of Nebuchadnezzar's officials. Their names were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. These four young men were taken to serve in King Nebuchadnezzar's court, but they had to be trained in the ways of Babylon. However, though they remained cooperative with their Babylonian overseers, even though they were cooperative, they remained true to the laws of Yahweh, and they gained a lot of respect. After a year of Babylonian training, Daniel learned of a dream that Nebuchadnezzar had that troubled him. When none of the king's advisors could interpret his dream, he became enraged and threatened to kill all of them. That's when Daniel asked to be given some time for him to ask his God, Yahweh, for the answer. And Nebuchadnezzar agreed. The four young men prayed that Yahweh would reveal the secret to Daniel, and God said yes. God not only told Daniel exactly what Nebuchadnezzar's dream was. Now, think about that for a second. What if you said, I had a dream last night and I told you what it was? That's just weird. But that's what happened. Daniel was told exactly what the dream was, and he was told exactly what it meant. Just like God had done 1,000 years before. Remember the story of Joseph and the Pharaoh? Well, when Daniel revealed the dream to Nebuchadnezzar and its meaning, he was immediately exalted as a leader, a ruler over the whole province. Daniel went to Nebuchadnezzar and put in a good word for his three friends, and so they were made administrators. So all four of them were exalted. To each of the four young men, they were given Babylonian names: Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now it was Daniel's three friends whose dedication to God was tested first. King Nebuchadnezzar's dream had been about a statue. Remember the dream? It had four different metals. It was gold on top, then silver, then bronze, and then iron. And then he explained that those four represented kingdoms. Well, Nebuchadnezzar apparently loved the fact that he personally was represented by the golden head. So he had an idea. I'll build that statue, but I'm going to make it out of all gold. And then I'm going to make all my officers bow down and worship it. So that's exactly what he did. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were a part of that group. Daniel wasn't at the time. He was whatever he was doing, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were part of that group, and they refused because they were servants of Yahweh. Because of their disobedience, you know the story, Nebuchadnezzar ordered that all three were thrown into the fiery furnace. And when Nebuchadnezzar gleefully looked into the fire, he didn't see 3 bodies burning, he saw 4 bodies walking around. God had miraculously saved them from the blazing hot fire. That's in Daniel 3. Well, Daniel continued serving the king's court long after Nebuchadnezzar died. History tells us that 4 more kings ruled over Babylon after Nebuchadnezzar, the last one being King Nabonidus. Now, Nabonidus was, he was king, but he didn't particularly enjoy ruling, especially in Babylon. So he traveled a lot. He left his son in charge. His son was a spoiled brat named Belshazzar. In the first year that Belshazzar was put in charge, Daniel had a dream. As Daniel asked God's messengers what the dream meant, he learned that it was similar to Nebuchadnezzar's dream, only with more detail. God told Daniel an overview of the rest of history, of the times of the Gentiles, when the Gentiles would rule over the land promised to Abraham. The first kingdom, of course, was Babylon, that was ruling at the time. But then there would come a 2-sided kingdom where one side would rise up against the other. Then that would be followed by a very swift kingdom who would eventually be led by 4 distinct heads. Finally, there would be a 4th devouring kingdom that would be especially terrifying. That kingdom would eventually be led by 10 rulers, but then those 10 would be taken over by one particularly boastful ruler who would rule until the Ancient of Days had had enough. And then one like the Son of Man would take over and reign over the kingdom, and his kingdom would last forever. That's all found in Daniel 7. Well, a couple of years later, Daniel had another dream. This dream was interpreted to him by Gabriel himself. And Gabriel told Daniel that this dream was given to him to explain some more details from his first dream. It dealt with the 2nd and 3rd kingdoms. Gabriel told Daniel that the 2nd kingdom, the 2-sided kingdom, would be, and he just named it. Okay, now understand, this is during the Babylonian Empire. This was all talking in the future. He just named it. The next one's going to be Medo-Persia. Though the kingdom would be 2-sided, like in the first dream, soon the Persian side would overshadow the other. Gabriel also told Daniel that the 3rd kingdom, that swift kingdom that divided into 4, he just said, well, that's going to be Greece. This was 2 centuries at least before it happened. He just named it. The next one's going to be Greece. And that out of those 4 rulers would rise one particularly evil leader who would cause great suffering for Daniel's people. That dream is in Daniel 8. Well, several years later, Daniel got to witness the first transition from the first kingdom to the 2nd kingdom. Belshazzar, the spoiled brat son of the king, held a feast for all the impressive people. And as he celebrated, he called to his servants to go get all of the gold vessels that were in the treasury that Nebuchadnezzar had stolen from the temple in Jerusalem. And his idea was to pass it around to all of his guests and have them all drink from them. Well, immediately, if you remember the story, a hand appeared, just a hand, and wrote on the wall. Cold sweat came over Belshazzar. He called all of his aides. Nobody could tell him what it was. So someone mentioned, well, actually the Queen Mother mentioned, there's this guy named Daniel. You need to talk to him. So Daniel came and explained the message that because of Belshazzar's evil actions, the Babylonian Empire was going to fall to guess who? The Medes and the Persians. That happened. We actually know the exact date that happened. October 12th, 539 BC. Now, how do we know that? Because there was a Babylonian, I don't even remember what you call it now, but it was etched in stone, and it had relative dates, and it also had in there a natural disaster that we can go back and pinpoint with our computers. So we know exactly the day that that happened. October 12th, 539 BC. The Second Kingdom was in place. The Persian Empire. The next year, the Persian king, whose name was Cyrus, issued a decree allowing the grandson of Jeconiah, remember we talked about him last week, the grandson of Jeconiah to lead a group of Jews back to Jerusalem. Though in fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecy, Zerubbabel was his name. He never sat on the throne. He never wore a crown. He never was king, but he was the recognized leader. Zerubbabel led the people back to Jerusalem, rebuilt the altar, and began working on rebuilding the temple. Unfortunately, they were stopped many times from the surrounding nations, but finally, the prophets Haggai and Zechariah proclaimed their vision from the Lord, encouraging the Jews to stop all the distractions and finish the temple. And they did. The temple was finally finished about 20 years after Zerubbabel started it. Get that, 20 years to build this temple. And it was finished 70 years after Solomon's temple had been destroyed, just like Jeremiah had prophesied. Meanwhile, Darius took over the throne of Persia and immediately began recognizing the value of Daniel. Daniel was getting older, but he lived through many kings. And Darius recognized his value, and he made plans to exalt Daniel to a leadership position over the whole kingdom. Well, the other Persian leaders were saying, "What are you doing?" They hated Daniel. They were jealous of Daniel. And so they talked the king, Darius, into setting aside a period of 30 days. I mean, they really stroked him and talked about how wonderful a king he was, and he was a god. And he said, to prove it, set 30 days aside where no one in your kingdom can petition anyone but you, fully knowing that Daniel prayed to his God 3 times a day. Sure enough, they caught him praying. Darius was forced because the law of the Medes and Persians could not be erased. He had put his signet ring on it. He couldn't go back on it. He was forced to sentence Daniel to be thrown into the den of lions. You know the story. God sent an angel to protect Daniel, and the next morning Darius found him alive and well. That's in Daniel 6. If we move forward a few years, we get to 485 BC. Xerxes I became the king of Persia. He was also known as King Ahasuerus. In the 3rd year of his reign, he held a huge feast. And in that feast, he became extremely disappointed with the queen. Following the advice of his closest friends, he banished the queen forever from his presence and put out an edict that all the beautiful young virgins were to come to be interviewed by the king, whatever interviewed means. So he followed the advice. He set that out, and he announced that he was looking for his next queen. In the capital city of Susa, there was a Jewish man who had been exiled to Babylon at the time of Jeconiah's arrest. So he'd been there a while. For some reason, he was not one of the Jews that went back with Zerubbabel. Instead, he stayed in Susa to care for his young cousin, a beautiful girl named what? Esther. Beautiful girl named Esther, whom he took as his own daughter. As it turned out, she was selected by Xerxes to be his queen, and Xerxes loved her very much. Through a turn of events, Xerxes was tricked into ordering the death of all the Jews throughout his kingdom. However, the Lord had appointed Esther for such a time as this. Esther 4:14, because she had the favor of the king. And she respectfully went before the king, asked for his favor, and the Jewish people were saved. From that miraculous turn of events, the Jewish people began celebrating, and they still celebrate to this day, what they call the Feast of Purim. That's found in Esther 9. Well, in 465 BC, Xerxes' son, Artaxerxes I, became king of Persia. 7 years into his reign, a second group left their Babylonian exile and returned to Jerusalem under the leadership of a priest named Ezra. When Ezra arrived in Jerusalem, he found the Jewish people there living way outside the law of Moses, the law of God that he'd given to Moses. So Ezra taught them their errors, brought revival to Jerusalem. And he stayed there for quite a while because his time there crossed someone else. You see, Artaxerxes had a very trusted cupbearer. Anybody know his name? Nehemiah. Artaxerxes had a trusted cupbearer from the Jewish exiles named Nehemiah. And when Nehemiah heard from his countrymen what terrible shape Jerusalem was in, he wept, he fasted, and he prayed, and he asked the Lord to give him favor in the eyes of Artaxerxes. Well, God arranged that opportunity, and Artaxerxes gave him letters allowing him to travel back to Jerusalem, taking some more Jews with him. At the king's command, Nehemiah led a third group back in 445 BC. That's found in Nehemiah 1 and 2. So while in Jerusalem, Nehemiah led the Jewish people to rebuild the wall. It's quite an amazing thing that they did, because they just took sections and families just side by side rebuilt the wall. And some of it they had to carry a weapon in one hand and a shovel in the other. They rebuilt the wall. Somewhere during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, God spoke through a prophet one last time, because he wouldn't speak again for 400 years. That prophet's name was Malachi. Though Ezra and Nehemiah had brought revival to the people of Israel, they were far from dedicated to the Lord, and God used Malachi to call them out on it. Though Jews from every tribe had returned to the land, they were relatively few in number and still under the thumb of Gentile nations. After all, there'd only been 2 kingdoms from Daniel's prayer. There were still 2 to go. From Daniel's prophecy, I should say. That brings us to the third, the Greek Empire. The third kingdom revealed to Daniel came to power over a century after the prophecies of Malachi. The swift kingdom of Greece conquered the Persian Empire in record time under a very famous leader. You know his name, Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire in around 330 BC, and he died, get this, Alexander the Great died at the age of 32. So this was a young man who just took the world by storm, literally. Unfortunately, at 32, his sons weren't old enough to take over. So what was Daniel's dream? That the third beast would be divided into 4. Well, when Alexander the Great died, 4 military leaders took over. Just like Gabriel had told Daniel. The leader placed over the land of Israel was named Ptolemy I. Ptolemy I was over the land of Israel until the first part of the 2nd century BC, when a man who bought his way up from one of the other 4 leaders bought his way up into power, and he captured Judea from the descendants of Ptolemy. His name was Antiochus. Antiochus proved to be the little horn that Daniel was told about in Daniel chapter 8. Antiochus made himself out to be a god. In fact, he insisted on being called Antiochus Epiphanes, making himself equal with the commander of the host of heaven, just like Daniel was told in Daniel 8, verse 11. He appointed for himself a high priest, and he set up an altar of Zeus in the temple. He then proceeded to outlaw Jewish festivals, he outlawed Jewish sacrifices, and he did his own sacrifices on the altar of God, but what he sacrificed were pigs. For the following 3 years, he slaughtered Jewish men, women, and children at will. This was an evil man. However, God raised up a leader named Judas Maccabeus, who led a revolution and took back control of Jerusalem. In December of 164 BC, Judas Maccabeus cleansed and rededicated the temple with an 8-day feast. That feast is still celebrated today. Anybody know what it is? Hanukkah. That's where the Feast of Hanukkah came from. For 113 years, the land of Israel was under the leadership of the Maccabean family, but things were far from peaceful. By the way, during Hanukkah, they rededicated the temple, and that fulfilled the prophecy in Daniel 8:14 that the temple would be restored in 2,300 days. It was exactly 2,300 days. So the leadership of Israel was the Maccabean family. That's what is known in the history books as a Hasmonean empire. The Maccabean family ruled, but it was far from peaceful. Civil war all over the place. All the while, the fourth kingdom was gaining strength. It was during the time of the Maccabees when the Jewish leadership was centralized under 2 groups. There were 2 groups that came into being during the Maccabean period. One group was priestly. They were priestly elites. They were very politically motivated. They stressed following the written Torah, ignoring any oral traditions. They pretty much controlled the temple and the ruling council that became known as the Sanhedrin. That group became known as the Sadducees. Another group rose in prominence. They focused more on synagogue teaching. They followed the Torah as well as traditions. They believed in the resurrection. They believed in things that were not necessarily clearly taught in the Torah that had been passed down from the fathers. And they became known as what? The Pharisees, right. That's where those 2 groups came from, out of the Maccabean period. Well, that brings us to 63 BC, the development of the Roman Empire. In 63 BC, civil war broke out in Judea between 2 of the ruling class brothers. Now understand this. We have Jewish people ruling over the land of Israel again, and they're from the same family. They're cousins or brothers, and they can't get along. So what did they do? Each of the brothers ran to someone named Pompey and said, "You got to help me." Both of the brothers did that, and Pompey was more than happy to go help, and suddenly Judea was under the thumb of the Roman Republic. When Julius Caesar defeated Pompey and took control of Rome in 48 BC, the 4th king of Daniel's prophecy began to take shape. It wasn't there yet. It was still the Roman Republic. In 44 BC, something happened that changed everything. Julius Caesar was assassinated. Et tu, Brute? Julius Caesar was assassinated. And the Roman Republic was divided among 3 leaders. The Second Triumvirate is what history calls it. The western part of the Republic went to Octavian. The eastern part went to Mark Antony. And Africa went to Lepidus. By 36 BC, Lepidus had been sidelined, and Octavian began spreading propaganda about Mark Antony. He defeated him at the Battle of Actium, but then started spreading propaganda about him, probably having something to do with his girlfriend. Eventually, Mark Antony and his girlfriend, Cleopatra, committed suicide, and Octavian became the sole ruler of Rome. Octavian wasn't very interested in sharing his leadership. He wanted it all. And so he was given the name Augustus Caesar, ending the Roman Republic, and the Roman Empire, the Fourth Kingdom, was born. And as you know, it was in the days of Caesar Augustus that a decree went out that a census be taken in all the inhabited earth. And it was shortly after that that history arrived at the birth of Jesus. But I've got to clear up an obvious problem. I talked about it the last couple weeks. How did God accomplish fulfilling the promise to King David when we saw in Jeremiah that the house of David was cut off at Jeconiah? Remember, we read that last week out of Jeremiah, that Count Coniah childless. Now, he had children, but he was talking about there will never be another on the house, on the throne of Israel, ever. Well, if you'll remember, okay, I can do this. If you'll remember, Josiah was a godly king. He had four sons, actually. One of them we never hear from again, but he had three sons that actually were king. His first son, Jehoahaz, was king for 3 months, taken to Egypt. The Egyptian Pharaoh appointed his brother to be king in his place, Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim reigned for 11 years, but then when he died, he's the one who had the son Jeconiah. Jeconiah was there for 3 months, and Nebuchadnezzar took him away and appointed his uncle, which would have been Jehoahaz and Jehoiakim's brother, and named him Zedekiah. So Josiah had those three sons all sit on the throne. Okay, Jehoahaz never had kids. He was 18 when he was taken down to Pharaoh. Jeconiah was taken off to Nebuchadnezzar. His kids were born in Babylon. In fact, his grandson was Zerubbabel that came back, but never king. Zedekiah, this is possibly the saddest story of all. When Nebuchadnezzar captured Jerusalem, he took Zedekiah and took Zedekiah's whole family, and he held Zedekiah down while they executed one by one every member of his family. And then they poked his eyes out. So the last thing he ever saw was his entire family being executed. The point is, there were no descendants from Zedekiah. So Jeconiah was it. And Jeremiah said, never again will there be a descendant of Jeconiah on the throne. And yet, as you know, Matthew began his gospel with the genealogy of Joseph. In that genealogy, in Matthew 1, verse 12, you can look it up, we find Jeconiah and his son Shealtiel and his grandson Zerubbabel. How do we work that together? Because according to Jeremiah, no king would come through King Jeconiah. Satan had successfully destroyed that line. You see, what Satan didn't understand was that Joseph's line was only a Jewish technicality, since Joseph wasn't Jesus' real father. The only bloodline, the only human bloodline in Jesus' veins came through Mary, right? Her genealogy is found in Luke 3. Mary's line also went back to King David, but not through Solomon and Rehoboam. Mary's line came from Solomon's full brother Nathan. You can see that in Luke 3:31. And 1 Chronicles 3:5 shows that Nathan and Solomon were full brothers. Basically what happened, this is awesome. While Satan busied himself attacking and manipulating the descendants of Solomon, the line of the promise just continued unnoticed in the background. Just growing right along. Do whatever you want to Solomon's. Just continued right along until the day that that Mary gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger. The line of the promise, the seed of the promise, the one who will sit on the throne of David forever, over the land promised to Abraham forever. Don't mess with God. The story of redemption is one where God turned heaven and earth to go from the fall of man to an answer named Jesus Christ, who died on the cross that we might live. Now, throughout the process, look at all the chances he gave humanity. Started out giving human beings a perfect home with nothing but perfection all around them. They had all that they could ever want. What happened? They sinned. Kicked them out of the garden. It was just free for all for a while. Started over with a man named Noah, right? And they all saw, there were 8 people. The whole population of planet Earth was 8 people after the flood. You realize that? And all of them had seen God. They knew what God did to sin. They had experienced it. They had smelled it. What happened? They fell into sin. God chose Abraham and chose him and said, through your people, I will stay with you. I will bless you. Went all the way through with Moses and told them, look, I will give you everything you could dream of if you'll just obey me. He gave them every opportunity. And what did they do? They sinned. Every opportunity. God sent prophets. God sent judges. God sent everything. He gave them godly kings. And the moment that an ungodly king came to power, they turned like that and went back to false gods. Every opportunity. There is no way you can tell me that there's a human being ever in existence who could earn their way to God. Because God proved in every scenario you could dream up that that's not possible. The only way for human beings to attain righteousness and holiness is if God did it himself. And that's exactly what he did when Jesus died on the cross and took our sin upon himself. But that's only half of the deal. He gave us his righteousness. So that, as Hebrews says, you and I are declared righteous. The moment you accepted Christ as your Savior, you were declared righteous. You were declared holy. That was his plan of redemption. I love the word redemption. You know, we do it every time we go into a restaurant or a store with a coupon. We know what redemption is, right? You know, used to we could give the illustration of those H&S green stamps or whatever they are. S&H, yeah, whatever they are. You know, they're totally worthless unless you take that book to, what was it called? A redemption center, right? A place where they assigned value to that which was otherwise valueless. That's redemption. That's the story of redemption. He assigned value to me. And it took him a long time to do it, but he did it. That's the story of redemption. Now, now you have, you should have, if you've collected them, you should have 7 handouts totally that go from. Now I don't have them here tonight, but I can print some more off if anybody needs it. But if you have all 7 of them, those timelines go from creation to Jesus. I'm working on putting all this into a little booklet, much like that Nissan 14 booklet. I'll have a booklet a little bit bigger than that, but not much, that will be the story of redemption. And I want all of y'all to have one when I finish it. But that's the story of redemption. So what questions do we have? See, we did it. 600 years. Right on time. Any thoughts or questions? Okay. Do you feel like you've just drunk out of a fire hydrant? Yeah. Well, there's value in the big picture. And the only way to do a big picture is walk through it. And that's what we've done. All right. Well, then let's move on to prayer time. And my pen keeps escaping my... Is there an extra pen anywhere? Ah, thank you. All right, all right. I would like to update on toward the bottom of box 2. Lori Owens, that's Suzanne's sister-in-law. They're the ones in Florida. She's back in the hospital. She has a lung disease that they're just trying to maintain, and every once in a while it just it's not COPD or it's I'm not exactly sure what they call it, but she's back. No, it's not cancer, but she's just couldn't breathe. So just appreciate your prayers for Lori Owens. What else? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Doug Hutchins is going to have a procedure on Friday. Okay. Okay. So we just need to pray for Doug. What's that? Yeah. So praise for Connie. We can pray for her anyway, but she's here.
I said I wasn't going to have that surgery.
Well.
I did want to be at first, but I said no.
Okay.
I'm not getting it done.
Okay. Well, we will support your decision. Until she starts hollering. Well, that's all right. Just don't holler at Gary. What else? Any other requests? Yes, Ernie.
I have talked to a friend today, and the friends of hers, family, Anthony's family. Anthony committed suicide.
Hmm.
He has, I think, 3 children and a wife. And he went upstairs and they heard a gunshot, and the kids ran up to see what was going on.
Oh my word. So Anthony, just a friend of a friend, but we won't put him on the prayer list here on out. But for tonight, pray for Anthony's family. Just the grief of suicide. It's terrible.
And Megan and I asked for prayer month and a half ago, maybe even 2 months. Her mother died. Well, Megan's brother died this past year.
Okay, so pray for a girl named Megan who lost her mother and her brother just in a short few months.
I have no idea what
Okay, Lord knows. Just pray for them, Anthony's family and Megan. Suzanne and I went to go see Woody. Woody's up and down. You know, some days when we saw him, he was doing pretty good. later that night, Sandra said he wasn't doing so well. So it's just up and down. But just pray for. It's a whole lot easier now that Sandra is only 2 miles away from him, so she can just pop back and forth, which is just a blessing of God. But he's still got a long way to go. So just pray for Woody and Sandra. Yes, Becky.
Daniel's nephew, Ethan, we've been praying.
Yes.
Ethan's girlfriend's name is Madison, and she had to have emergency appendectomy. So please pray for her.
What was her name?
Madison.
Madison. So a friend of.
Ethan's girlfriend.
Yeah. So a friend of Daniel's. Yeah. Okay. Madison, pray for surgery. Okay.
And Frank Lujan, he had his post-op appointment today, and he's doing okay. So
Okay. Frank, for Frank, okay is good.
yeah.
He's got so many things going on. So just Frank is about a little less than halfway down box 2. Elveline's son-in-law. So he's doing well.
Andy asked for prayer for his friend Joseph, who's in box 3 near the bottom.
Yes.
He has orientation for a new job on Monday, and needs God's guidance.
Okay. Pray for Joseph. Toward the bottom of box 3, Andy's friend just needs God's wisdom.
David Olivares today was going in for a chemo treatment, and they could not do it. He started where he couldn't breathe, and so they rushed him in. He had blood clots in both lungs, so they're supposed to be trying to get him out tonight. So.
Okay. So David Olivares had a chemo treatment. He reacted, and they found out he has blood clot in both lungs. So just pray for David
Yeah,
and his family.
And the last thing, Terry Lujan said, please pray, because at the nursing home, where Evelyn and Pat are, they have 7 cases of COVID, and they're on lockdown.
Yeah. So where Pat and Elveline are, they've got COVID. So they're not on lockdown since Saturday. So just pray for all of them, but pray that Elveline and Pat stay above it. So far, so good. What else? Caroline. Okay. Caroline has an unspoken. You'll have to ask God. What else? No, thank you. She's still coming up dry on job search, and unemployment is running out. So we're just praying hard. Something comes up. Granddaughter that had the brain surgery. The report came back that it had not grown any. So we are praising the Lord. I'm sorry. I should have. That's charis, Greek for grace. So just praise the Lord for that. What else? All right. Well, let's have a word of prayer and just pray for all of these that were mentioned. Pray for the number at your table. I think everybody's table has a number, and then just whoever's left, just pray for our nation. It's possible by the time we leave here that the government will be back open, but I'm not holding my breath. So pray for our nation, and just pray for God's kingdom, and then I'll close. gracious Father, I thank you for tonight. I just pray you'd give us a safe drive home. And Father, just bring us back Sunday that we might worship you. Thank you for your grace. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Thank you all very much. And just read the announcements. I've already mentioned them, but just don't forget. All right, thank you.